They applauded when the casket closed. That was my first warning. It wasn't a loud applause. Not the kind you hear after a concert or a graduation speech. No, it was scattered, hesitant. A few hands clapping like they weren't sure if they were allowed, and others joining in because, I guess, that's what rich people do when they're relieved a tyrant's dead. But then I turned and saw her, my wife, smiling. That perfect TV anchor, slow burn smile she only used when she was sealing a deal or hiding a secret. Her black dress was custom, the heels red-bottomed, and her phone screen still on, just dimmed, like she couldn't be bothered to pause whatever she was texting even for her father's burial. 5 rows back, I sat alone. I wasn't allowed to be up front. Not anymore. Her family made that clear. That's when I realized I wasn't her husband anymore. I was a placeholder, a loose end, a name on a prenup. I should have walked away then. Should have grabbed my coat and left before the will reading, before the champagne, before the moment that would flip everything upside down, before the look on her face turned from smug to terrified. But I stayed, because part of me needed to see how far she'd go. An hour later, we were all seated in the drawing room of her family's estate, the kind of place with marble floors so polished you can see your own shame in them. Her brothers were already arguing about who got the boat and who got the vineyard. Her aunt was crying, not from grief, but because she wasn't mentioned in the preliminary draft of the will. And Sutton, my wife, was sipping champagne and whispering with her lawyer like she was getting ready for a promotion, not a funeral. Then the attorney walked in with the sealed envelope. And what happened next? I wouldn't believe it myself if I hadn't lived it. The room went dead silent when the lawyer opened the envelope. You could hear the rustle of paper like thunder across marble. Sutton crossed her legs slowly, deliberately, like a woman who had already rehearsed this moment in her mind a dozen times. Her posture said, I've already won. But the twitch in her left eye? That said something else. The lawyer, Mr. Donnelly, old and brittle as antique glass, cleared his throat and began reading. Per the final revised will of Richard Monroe Holbrook, dated 14 days prior to his passing. I didn't even blink. I just watched her. Sutton tilted her chin with quiet confidence. The entire room seemed to orbit her. Her 2 brothers, Brent and Corbin, both bloated with ego and alcohol, leaned in. Her mother clutched a silk handkerchief like she was waiting for a movie to start. The estate, including liquid and non-liquid assets, shall be placed into a protected trust, not to be accessed or divided until the designated stipulations are met. Sutton's smile thinned just slightly. Stipulations? She asked under her breath, almost joking. Mr. Donnelly didn't look up. Control of the trust, including the estate's revenue streams, is granted to. He paused, and for a second I thought he was choking. I wasn't ready. I didn't expect what came next. Clayton James Dillard. I forgot how to breathe. Her mother gasped like someone had thrown cold water on her. Her brothers made noises, half cough, half laughter, as if the old man had misread it. Sutton dropped her champagne glass. It hit the carpeted floor with a dull thud, but didn't shatter. It just fell like her plans. She looked at me like I'd stood up in the middle of the room and started screaming. But I hadn't said a word. Me? The broke, blue-collar, duct-tape everything, HVAC-fixing husband she had emotionally ghosted months ago? The same man she quietly filed divorce papers against 2 days before the funeral? Yes, me. Mr. Donnelly continued, almost robotically. Access to the full sum is contingent on the surviving spouse remaining legally and matrimonially bound to Mr. Dillard for a minimum duration of 12 consecutive months following Mr. Holbrook's death. The walls shrank. I felt the air press against my back like I was in a collapsing cave. Sutton didn't speak, didn't blink. Her jaw was locked, so tight I thought she might snap her molars. 12 months. Her father, the man who once told me I looked like someone who parked the cars, not drove them, had handed me the key to the empire. Not her. Not the blood heirs. Not the lawyer boyfriend she thought I didn't know about. He chose the one person she least expected. And he locked her in a gilded cage with me to get it. When Mr. Donnelly finished reading, no one moved. It was like someone had hit pause on the entire family. Then she stood up. Slowly. Her voice didn't match the shaking in her hands. This is a joke. He wouldn't do that. He wouldn't give him control over my money. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Her panic was louder than any words I could have thrown back at her. Daddy didn't trust you, she said, stabbing a finger in my direction. He barely tolerated you. This is fake. It has to be fake. But I wasn't even looking at her anymore. I was looking at her phone screen, now glowing face up on the floor, lit up with a preview of a message she never got to read aloud. It's done. Divorce papers were filed. Once I get the money, I'm yours. A message from a number saved under the name H. And just like that, I realized this wasn't just betrayal. This was a setup. And she had just walked into her own trap. Not mine. Her father's. Sutton didn't scream. That's what unnerved me the most. She didn't cry or flip a chair or threaten the lawyer or throw one of her designer heels across the marble. She just stood there, blinking slowly, like her brain was still buffering. And then came the smile. That practiced, razor-thin, politician's daughter smile she used when speaking to people she secretly despised. I'd seen that smile aimed at waiters, at women she didn't consider competition, and most often, at me. Only this time, it cracked before her voice did. Well, she said, her voice carefully smooth. I suppose Daddy wanted to play his little games from beyond the grave. No one replied. Not her brothers, not her mother, not the lawyer, not me. It felt like we were all holding our breath, waiting to see how the serpent would shed her skin. She leaned over, plucked her phone off the floor, read the still-lit message, locked the screen without blinking, and put the phone in her purse like it hadn't just exposed her affair in front of the entire family. Then she turned to me, slowly, and said with nauseating sweetness, Clayton, darling, I believe you and I have a lot to talk about. I didn't answer, because I already knew what was coming next. Sutton wasn't just going to lie down and accept her father's last words like gospel. No, she would smile, manipulate, maneuver, and calculate every move until she found a crack in the system. That's what Sutton did best, leverage. And I had just become her only currency. We drove back to the guest house in silence. Not a word exchanged. She didn't even look at me. But the tension in the air was almost cinematic, like a scene from a courtroom drama where both sides know the truth, but only one has proof. The moment the door closed behind us, the mask dropped. You think this is funny? She hissed, spinning around so fast I thought she'd break her heel. You think Daddy giving you control over my money is some kind of poetic justice? I stayed calm. That's all I could do. Calm was the only weapon I had left. I didn't know. I swear. Oh, please, she snapped. You expect me to believe that? That my father just gave you everything out of the goodness of his heart? You, a guy who still uses a flip phone and fixes air conditioners for a living? That stung, but I didn't flinch. She stepped closer, her voice softening like she thought she could reel me back in. Clay, baby, we've been through so much. You know how my father was. Controlling. Paranoid. Vindictive. This wasn't about you. This was about hurting me. You're not the prize, you're the punishment. I looked her right in the eye and said something I didn't even know I believed until it left my mouth. Then maybe you deserve to be punished. Her lips parted in genuine shock. For a moment, I saw something she never let anyone see, fear. Not fear of me, fear of losing. She wasn't in control anymore. And that terrified her. That night, she didn't leave. She didn't threaten me. She didn't insult me again. She made us dinner. Actual dinner. Fettuccine Alfredo from scratch. A dish she once said was too peasanty to even smell. She poured us wine. She tried to touch my hand. And I let her. Because I needed to know what came next. I needed to know how far she would go. I didn't sleep a minute. Neither did she, though she pretended to. Around 3 a.m., I watched her from across the room as she stared at the ceiling, face lit faintly by the street lamp through the window, her fingers moving across her phone under the covers. Planning. Calculating. Plotting. I wasn't her husband anymore. I was the last obstacle between her and $250 million. And now I had to survive a year in a house with a woman who'd already buried one man. By the next morning, Sutton had rewritten the narrative. It started with a phone call to her mother over coffee. A quiet, private chat on the terrace, just out of earshot but well within sight. She wore her silk robe, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky, and gestured softly with her hands like a woman discussing a minor inconvenience. Her voice was calm, almost pitiful. She even dabbed at the corners of her eyes, dry as a desert, but it sold the performance. I couldn't hear the words, but I already knew the script. Clayton's struggling. This is too much power for someone like him. He's not well. Daddy didn't mean for this. It's a mistake. I'm worried about him. That was her favorite tactic, planting seeds. Not attacking directly, just suggesting weakness, doubt, letting others draw their own conclusions while she stayed clean. Later that day, her brother Brent swung by the guest house with 2 lattes and a grin too fake for daylight. We'd never been close. He once called me a charity husband at a Christmas party, but now he acted like we were war buddies. Just checking in, he said, settling on the couch like he owned the place. I heard about the trust thing. Wild stuff, huh? I nodded. Yeah, unexpected. He chuckled. You know, Dad wasn't always the clearest thinker toward the end. Meds, age, stress. You get it. There it was. The angle. Brent leaned forward, lowering his voice like we were co-conspirators. Look, nobody's trying to challenge anything yet. But Sutton, she's rattled. She doesn't want to fight. She just wants to talk. Maybe come to an arrangement. Something private. Clean. I didn't answer. Just stared at him until the silence made him shift uncomfortably. That's when I realized what was happening. They weren't just trying to recover the money. They were trying to isolate me. Break me down. Make me look unstable. Just unstable enough that, if this ever did go to court, there'd be whispers. Maybe even a quiet psychiatric evaluation. The rich never yell to get their way. They whisper behind mahogany doors until everything around you collapses. And Sutton? She was the architect. That night, she cooked again. She wore a soft gray dress. No makeup, hair down. Her natural look, which was somehow even more calculated than her usual glam. She didn't mention the will, or the trust, or Brent's visit. She just asked if I remembered our honeymoon. Remember that tiny cabin in Asheville? She said, smiling over roasted chicken. That little bakery we found by accident, with the cinnamon rolls the size of your head? I nodded slowly. You threw one at me when it was cold. She laughed. You deserved it. You called me dramatic. You were dramatic. You screamed because the icing melted. It was my favorite dress, she said with a grin, then paused. It still is. I wanted to scream, to call her out, to ask her if that dress was also the one she wore when she met the man texting her promises of freedom and millions. But I didn't. I needed to know what her next move was, and I had to let her believe I was still Clayton the Clueless. By midnight, she had moved from the guest room back into the master suite. No conversation, no questions, just slid under the covers like nothing had changed. And here's the thing, I let her. Because deep down, I needed to understand what her endgame looked like. If she was going to play this long con for 12 months, I had to see it from the inside. But what I didn't know, not yet, was that Sutton wasn't playing just one game. She was playing 3. The first was against me, the second against the trust, and the third, against someone she thought I'd never find out about. It started with a car I didn't recognize. A black Lincoln with government plates. Not rented, not flashy. The kind of vehicle you see parked outside gated communities with tinted windows and an engine so quiet it hums like a threat. It showed up on a Tuesday afternoon, stayed for 20 minutes, then disappeared without a sound. Sutton never mentioned it. She waited until after dark to make a phone call in the garden, barefoot, glass of wine in hand, pretending to look at the stars like she was just another grieving daughter reflecting on the universe. But I knew the patterns. Sutton never looked up unless someone was watching. She always knew her angles. So I watched her from inside the house, just far enough behind the curtain that I could see her mouth move but not hear the words. Whoever she was talking to, it wasn't family. And it definitely wasn't me. Later that night, while she showered, 10 minutes longer than usual, eucalyptus steam billowing out like a fog bank, I checked the side pocket of her purse. She always kept a few receipts, mints, lip balm, a backup phone battery, and a letter, folded in half, typed, and signed, but dated exactly 4 weeks before her father's death. No envelope, just the paper, heavyweight, watermarked, rich people stationery. Sutton, I've done all I can on my end. The amendment is ironclad. The only variable now is your timing. Once the estate triggers, and provided you are no longer bound, the money clears. Clean. No oversight. No delay. You know what that means. There was no name at the bottom. Just a single initial. H. My stomach flipped. That was the same contact from the message I'd seen during the will reading. Whoever H was, they weren't just a fling. They were part of something bigger. Someone who knew about the trust. Someone who expected Sutton to be unbound when it activated. Someone who never expected her to get outplayed. I put the letter back exactly as I found it. Every crease matched. Every corner aligned. She couldn't know I'd seen it. Not yet. But that night, lying next to her while she pretended to sleep, I began mapping out every encounter, every name she dropped in passing, every phone call she stepped outside to make. I replayed her sudden interest in visiting family friends out of state. I remembered her casually mentioning someone named Harlan during a wine tasting 6 months ago, said he was old money with new ideas. I hadn't thought twice about it at the time. Now I couldn't think about anything else. 2 days later, the Lincoln returned. This time Sutton didn't take the meeting in the house. She got into the car. She didn't come back for 3 hours. And when she did, she was smiling again. That same terrifying smile from the funeral. The smile that said, "I'm 3 moves ahead, and you'll never catch up." That night, she left a book on the kitchen counter. Estate Law and Inheritance Protections. Brand new. Unopened. Spine unbroken. But it wasn't there for her. It was for me. A message, silent and sharp. "I'm learning the rules. You should too." I couldn't sleep. I barely ate. But I did start digging. I pulled every public record on her father's holdings, every court filing tied to the Hallbrook name, every business partner, trust consultant, and legal associate with even a sliver of connection to the estate. And there he was, Harlan K. Ashbury, private wealth attorney, former trustee for 3 Fortune 500 families, known for flipping clauses and cleaning complications. In 2 previous cases, a will had been amended, heirs cut out, and public records sealed. No scandal, no lawsuits, just silence. Now he was in my life, in our life, and Sutton had brought him in like a silent weapon, like an assassin with a law degree and a clean signature. She wasn't just trying to wait out the 12 months. She was trying to erase the calendar completely. For the next week, Sutton became the perfect wife. She cooked every night. Not just pasta and salads like before. She made meals she knew I loved but never respected. Pot roast, jambalaya, biscuits and gravy from scratch. She laughed at my dry jokes, rubbed my shoulders when I sat too long in front of the computer, left notes on the bathroom mirror written in lipstick. "Still yours. Always." It was unnerving. This wasn't guilt. This wasn't reconciliation. This was optics. She wanted me documented, pictured, remembered as happy, stable, functional. The kind of husband no court could claim was suffering from stress or delusion. Because if her endgame was to challenge the trust on grounds of mental unfitness or marital failure, she'd need a clean trail showing she'd tried, that I was the broken one, not her. So I played along. I smiled for the photos she subtly staged. I accepted the wine she poured, the conversations she steered, the compliments she gave. I said things like, "You're different lately," and "I'm glad we're reconnecting." Just loud enough for her to remember the words, maybe even repeat them to someone else later. But every night, after she fell asleep, always facing the opposite direction, I went back to my search. Harlan Ashbury was good. No paper trail. No firm website. Just enough interviews to sound legitimate. Just enough law board activity to stay visible. But I found something he didn't hide well. A business alias registered in New Mexico under a shell corporation called Petros Vale Holdings. The only other name listed under that LLC? Sutton Hallbrook Dillard. And the registration date? 2 months before her father's death. That was the proof I needed. Evidence that Sutton had been working with Harlan long before she ever saw the trust paperwork. Before her father died. Maybe even before the heart attack. She hadn't just been expecting the inheritance. She had been plotting around it. I made the first call to a local lawyer I knew from years ago. Frank Mazurek. Older guy. Tough. Handshake like concrete, and a voice like he chewed gravel. He remembered me. I told him nothing detailed, just that I might need estate protection advice, and that the people involved had deep pockets and darker connections. "Come in tomorrow," he said. "Bring documents. Wear shoes you can run in." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared of Sutton, not physically, but because I finally understood the depth of what I was inside. This wasn't just divorce. This was a heist. A social, emotional, financial dismantling of a man too dumb to see the walls closing in. She was smart enough to know the law, and ruthless enough to bend it. The next morning, I was ready to leave early for the meeting with Frank. I had the documents printed, sealed in an old folder that used to hold my HVAC permits. I was halfway to the front door when Sutton called out from behind me, standing in the kitchen in her robe, holding her coffee like it was a scene from a luxury ad. "Going somewhere?" she asked, too sweet. I turned. Just errands. She tilted her head, smiled gently. That's not your usual folder. It's not brown. I froze. She noticed everything. She stepped closer. Her tone was light, but the undertone was cold. You know, Clay, if you ever feel like you don't trust me, if you ever feel like you're scared of me or that I'm manipulating you, you should just say it. I mean, we're in this together, right? My mouth was dry. Right. She leaned in, kissed my cheek, and whispered, because if I find out you're going behind my back, even for a second, I'll make sure you regret it in a way that doesn't leave bruises. Then she walked past me, humming. I made it to Frank's office 2 hours late. I had to circle the block 5 times. Had to check if I was being followed. Had to convince myself that this wasn't just paranoia, that Sutton hadn't installed something in my car, or my phone, or my mind. But when I finally sat down in Frank's office and opened that folder, I saw it clearly. This wasn't about surviving her anymore. It was about beating her at her own game, before she changed the rules entirely. Frank didn't speak for nearly 2 minutes after reading through the documents. He just kept flipping the pages slowly, eyes narrowed, jaw clenched. The kind of silence that carries weight. The kind that makes you realize you've brought something far bigger than you thought into the room. You said she's working with Harlan Ashbury? He asked finally, not looking up. Yeah, I said. And maybe someone else. I found records. They set up a holding company before her dad even died. Frank exhaled through his nose like a bull sizing up a matador. Well, that explains the timing. And the pressure. Then he slid the papers back across the table like they were hot. Clay, if what you're telling me is true, and I believe it is, this isn't just estate fraud. This is a coordinated attempt to circumvent a high-value trust. Could be criminal. That word hit me like a brick. Criminal. I stared at the folder. This whole time, I thought Sutton was just cruel. Selfish. Cold. But this was premeditated. Engineered. Her father's death, her timing, the lawyer in the Lincoln. It wasn't just grief wrapped in greed. It was something deeper. Right at the foundation. I need to know how far back this goes, I said. I need to know if Sutton manipulated her dad before he died, or if she just waited for the clock to run out. Frank leaned back in his chair. Then you need something concrete. Emails. Letters. Anything that shows intent before the will was changed. I thought about that all the way home, and that's when I remembered the safe. There was an old built-in safe inside Richard Holbrook's study. He never used it for cash, too small for anything flashy. He used it for letters, mostly. Private things. Things he didn't trust to digital storage. Sutton used to complain about it. Said he was paranoid like a 90-year-old mobster. After the funeral, they locked the study. Said it would stay sealed until the estate transitioned fully. But I still had access to the guest house. And I still had the master keys from when Richard asked me to install the new security system 2 years ago. So that night, when Sutton went to a yoga and wine retreat with her friend Natalie, I waited. Gave her a 3-hour head start. Then I drove back to the main estate under the cover of a cold drizzle and an alibi. I let myself in through the side entrance. Disarmed the outdated alarm system. Same code Richard had used for years. Made my way to the study, heart pounding. It smelled like cedar and whiskey and something old. Something final. The safe was behind the bookshelf, just like I remembered. I entered the code. 5-2-7-3. Sutton's birthday. Richard used it out of irony, I think. Or guilt. The lock clicked open. Inside were 3 things: a stack of personal letters tied with twine, a single Polaroid photo of Sutton as a child in her father's arms, and an envelope. Not addressed to anyone. Just sealed in red wax, stamped with Richard's personal ring. I broke it open with shaking hands. Inside was a single sheet of cream paper. Typed, "To whom it may concern, if you are reading this, then Sutton has done exactly what I feared she would do." I altered the will not out of spite, but because I saw her drift into the company of men and women who speak in profit margins and soul trades. She is not the girl I raised. She has become something else, a version of her mother, perhaps, multiplied by opportunity and unchallenged power. Clayton, if it's you holding this, then know this trust is not a gift. It's a shield. And if you want to survive what's coming, you'll need more than integrity. You'll need proof. And allies. Start with the land deed in New Mexico. There, you'll understand why Sutton wanted the trust broken so badly. Don't trust the lawyers. I read it 3 times. Then I put everything back exactly the way I found it. And I left. But in my gut, I knew something had changed. This wasn't just a story about betrayal anymore. This was a war over legacy. And I had been drafted into a battle I didn't ask for, guarding a fortune I didn't want, against a woman I once believed was my forever. New Mexico was dry, cracked, and quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you question your own thoughts. I hadn't been there in years, not since Sutton dragged me to some resort outside Santa Fe and spent the entire weekend complaining about the dusty aesthetic. But this time, I wasn't there for a spa. I was there for the land deed. Frank had helped pull the original document, a rural parcel registered under Hallbrook Energy Holdings, buried in a trust nobody had touched in nearly 30 years. Richard had bought it during the oil boom and kept it off the books. No buildings, no leases, just raw land surrounded by nothing but dirt and questions. But when I arrived, I saw something different. A structure, half buried, modern, steel and glass sunk into a hillside like a bunker in plain sight. And inside, servers, files, locked drawers, quiet hums and blinking lights, all powered by solar panels and off-grid batteries. The kind of setup you don't build for vacation. You build it to hide something. I took pictures, documented everything. Serial numbers, hard drives, tax records tied to Petros Vale Holdings, the same LLC Sutton and Harlan had registered under. Turns out, this wasn't just a backup site. It was a laundering operation. One Sutton planned to funnel money through once the trust was dissolved. Millions of dollars set to shift quietly through real estate shell companies, art auctions, even cryptocurrency mining equipment housed in the back. Her father knew, and that's why he'd written that letter. Why he'd changed the will. Why he'd chosen me. Not because I was smart or strategic, but because I was the only one who still believed in something. I took everything. Photos, physical copies, sent it all to Frank. And then I waited. It didn't take long. The legal filing hit the court 2 weeks later. An attempted override of the trust clause, filed by Sutton's legal team on the grounds of unfit beneficiary. Their claim? I was erratic, emotionally unstable, possibly coercive. But they didn't expect the motion we hit them with in return. Fraud, conspiracy, financial misconduct, attempted circumvention of estate law. We attached the letter, the land documents, the paper trail between Sutton and Harlan, and most damning of all, a digital receipt from the New Mexico site, with Sutton's electronic signature authorizing asset transfers dated 2 weeks before her father's death. The courtroom never made it to a full hearing. They settled, quietly, privately, but not before the judge reinstated full control of the trust under the original amendment. Not before Sutton's lawyers dropped her and Harlan's license was suspended pending investigation. She lost everything. Not just the money, not just the trust, but the image, the network, the story she told herself, that she was always in control, always one step ahead. The empire her father built now had her name scrubbed from it like a bad investment. Sutton left the estate a month later. No note, no contact, just vanished, probably into some villa paid for with the last of her unseized accounts. She sent divorce papers the old-fashioned way, mailed. No signature, just the line. Do whatever you want. I'm done pretending. I signed them with a smile. Now, I live in a quiet house outside Marfa. Not big, not fancy, no staff, no drama. There are no mirrors in the place. That was a choice. I got tired of watching myself try to make other people happy. I still work. HVAC, sometimes. Consulting now and then. But mostly, I write. I think. I breathe. I have coffee that doesn't taste like tension and toast that doesn't come with side-eye. And sometimes, when I walk out to the edge of the property at dusk, I look at the horizon and remember that funeral. The champagne, the fake tears, the applause. And then I remember something else. She thought she buried me, but all she really did was free me.